You know what's wild? Some of the worst ideas in car history didn't come from amateurs. They came from engineers with unlimited budgets who still got it catastrophically wrong. Number 7 is something a major brand spent millions trying to forget. Number 1. The Ford Edsels steering wheel gear selector. Let's start with one that still baffles engineers today. Ford spent $400 million developing the Edsel, nearly $4 billion in today's money, and one of its big headline features was a set of transmission buttons mounted right in the center of the steering wheel hub. The logic made sense on paper. Put the controls where your hands already are. Clean, modern, futuristic. Ford's engineers were genuinely proud of it. Here's what they missed. In an emergency, every driver instinctively grabs the center of the wheel, hard, which meant slamming random buttons and accidentally shifting gears at exactly the wrong moment. Drivers were hitting reverse instead of drive. The Edsel was discontinued after 3 years. Ford lost the equivalent of $4 billion. The steering wheel gear selector disappeared, and nobody ever tried it again. Number 2. The Chevrolet Vega's self-destructing engine. The Vega was General Motors' big answer to the Japanese economy car invasion of the early 1970s. Lightweight, efficient, modern. And at its heart was a genuinely clever piece of engineering, an all-aluminum engine block with no iron cylinder liners, lighter than anything the competition had, a real technical achievement. There was just one problem. Aluminum and steel expand at different rates when they heat up. The block would grow. The steel pistons could not keep up. Within 50,000 miles, sometimes far less, the cylinder bores went oval. Oil consumption became extreme. Engines simply burned themselves out. General Motors' own engineers had flagged this during development. The fix existed. It cost almost nothing to implement. It was not implemented. Over 2 million Vegas were sold between 1971 and 1977. The reputation damage was so bad it followed General Motors for an entire decade. Number 3. The Trabant's body that cannot die. East German engineers in the 1950s had a real problem. Steel was scarce. So they invented Duraplast, a composite of Soviet cotton fibers and phenol resin. Strong, cheap, and impossible to rust. The Trabant's entire body was made from it. Sounds like smart engineering. What they did not think through is what happens when the car dies. Duraplast cannot be recycled. It cannot be crushed. It cannot decompose. It is essentially indestructible waste. When reunification came in 1990 and millions of East Germans immediately abandoned their Trabants for Western cars, the country had a crisis on its hands. Fields filled with bodies of cars that nothing on earth could break down. Special landfills had to be created. The panels are still out there right now, sitting exactly where they were left. The engineers had built the most durable car body in history and accidentally created an environmental disaster that is still not fully resolved. The Pacer is one of the bold-looking cars of the 1970s. Wide, round, unlike anything else on the road. AMC's engineers decided that since most passengers get in from the curbside, the passenger door should be 4 inches wider than the driver's door. More practical, more passenger-friendly. It actually makes sense, right? In reality, what it created was a car that felt fundamentally wrong every time you parked it. That longer door would swing wide and catch everything nearby in a parking lot. The structural asymmetry gave the whole car a slightly off feeling that drivers noticed immediately and never forgot. It's one of those things where you can't quite explain why it bothers you, but it does, every single time. The Pacer was discontinued after 5 years. AMC never made another car with mismatched doors. Looking back, it's hard to imagine how this made it through a single design review without someone raising their hand. Number 5. The Subaru 360 in America. Subaru launched the 360 in America in 1968 as the ultimate economy car. 966 pounds. Tiny, cheap, fuel efficient. It was marketed directly to American drivers who were spending a fortune on gas. The problem was that American roads were full of vehicles weighing 3,500 pounds, more than 3 times as much. Consumer Reports tested the 360, and their verdict was direct. They called it the most unsafe car currently sold in America. In a collision with any normal vehicle on any American road, the physics were not complicated. The 360 would be destroyed. Subaru's response was essentially that drivers should be more careful. The 360 was quietly pulled from the U.S. market. It was the last time anyone tried to sell a car in America, while Consumer Reports was actively calling it a death trap. You would think that would have been obvious from the start. Number 6. Citroën's panels that aged in public. Citroën had a genuinely smart idea for the BX. Instead of painting the body, they molded the plastic panels in their final color. No paint meant no rust, lower production costs, and minor scrapes did not expose bare metal. It was clever, practical engineering that solved several real problems at once. Plastic fades in sunlight, and it does not fade evenly. Different panels faded at different rates depending on their position, their angle to the sun, and the exact batch of plastic they came from. Within a few years, owners had cars that were visibly 3 or 4 different shades of the same color at the same time. After any collision, no body shop in the world could match the exact weathered shade of the surrounding panels. The only real fix was replacing every exterior panel at once. That cost more than the car was worth. Citroën quietly went back to painted bodywork and never mentioned this experiment publicly again. The clever idea had one fatal flaw that somehow nobody caught until it was too late. Number 7. BMW's single dial for everything. This is the one that BMW has never fully recovered from in terms of reputation. In 2001, they removed virtually every physical button from the interior of the new 7 Series and replaced it with a single rotary dial on the center console. One dial for everything. Audio, navigation, climate, phone, suspension settings, seat heating, all of it buried inside nested menus and controlled by one knob. BMW's engineers genuinely believed this was the future. Too many buttons was a real problem. iDrive would solve it. They spent years developing it and launched it as a selling point. Car journalists picked up the car and reported needing the owner's manual open beside them to change a radio station. Owners were pulling over to adjust the temperature. The backlash was immediate and brutal. BMW spent the following years steadily adding physical buttons back to the cabin while publicly insisting that iDrive had been a success. It had not been a success. It remains the most criticized interior design decision in modern automotive history, and it only happened because an entire engineering team convinced themselves that one dial made sense. Number 8. The Pontiac Aztek. Approved by actual humans. The Aztek is not just an ugly car, it is proof of what happens when nobody in a room is willing to say the obvious thing out loud. The original concept had a vision. Then, committees got involved. Marketing wanted changes. Manufacturing had constraints. Safety required modifications. Each individual decision seemed defensible in isolation. The result was a vehicle that somehow combined the worst visual qualities of an SUV, a minivan, and a station wagon at the same time, with a plastic body cladding that made every awkward proportion more visible. General Motors ran internal surveys during development. Their own employees said they did not want to be seen in it. It went into production anyway. The lead designer publicly apologized for it years later. It is now literally the case study taught in design schools for how groupthink destroys good judgment. Hundreds of people signed off on this car. Not one of them stopped it. British engineers at Reliant were solving a genuine problem. In the UK, a 3-wheeled vehicle is classified as a motorcycle, meaning you only need a motorcycle license to drive one. Reliant put one wheel at the front and two at the rear, making the Robin legally a motorcycle and opening it to millions of drivers who could not afford a full license. Clever, practical, a real market solution. The problem is physics. One front wheel means the car's cornering geometry is fundamentally unstable. Any significant lateral force, a roundabout taken at a normal speed, a sudden lane change, or a wet road, would lift the single front wheel and tip the entire car onto its side. This was not a freak accident. This was the predictable result of the design. Top Gear demonstrated this by rolling one repeatedly on an ordinary roundabout. Reliant sold over 100,000 of them. The engineers had genuinely solved the licensing problem. They had genuinely failed to solve the staying upright problem. Somehow, nobody in the development process thought those two things needed to be solved together. Number 10. The Oldsmobile diesel that killed American diesel cars. In 1977, Oldsmobile needed to improve fuel economy fast. Their solution was simple. They took the existing 350 cubic inch gasoline V8 engine, swapped the fuel system for diesel, and put it in their cars. Same block, same architecture. Fast, cheap, done. Diesel engines operate at dramatically higher compression ratios than gasoline engines. The internal forces are completely different. The block needed to be stronger, the head bolts required a different pattern, and the internal components had to handle the extra load. Oldsmobile used the gasoline architecture and only changed the fuel. The engine was being asked to do something it was not built to do. Head bolts stripped, blocks cracked, engines failed, often within 10,000 miles. These engines were in Oldsmobiles, Buicks, and Cadillacs, the premium brands of General Motors. Luxury car owners were stranded on the side of the road. The lawsuits followed. The reputation damage was so complete that it set back the entire American diesel car market by 30 years. One bad engineering shortcut did not just hurt Oldsmobile. It convinced an entire generation of American buyers that diesel engines could not be trusted.